My name is Monk Rowe, and we are in New York City. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with Terry Gibbs here. Just to describe myself as a hero of New York.
No, not a hero. I grew up in New York,
Okay.
and I very fortunate. I really did well in New York. I was accepted royally. I was the house band leader at Birdland in my younger days. It would always be Count Basie, Sarah Vaughan, Terry Gibbs, Duke Ellington, Dinah Washington, Terry Gibbs. But I was there 6 months a year, and I'd be on the road the other 6 months. Mm-hmm. But I was always accepted, and it was great. I got a chance to play with everybody in the world.
Mm-hmm. Was it here where you you won the Major Bowes contest?
I grew up in Brooklyn,
yeah.
and I was in Major Bowes. And when I was 13, in fact, last December was 64 years that I'd been on the road. I know every cockroach in every hotel in the world. I've been on the road, no estate, you name it. A few cockroaches became my friends, in fact. A few in this hotel I'm staying at. Oh, God.
Was there something in your family that led you into music?
Is that why you brought up with the cockroaches? Wait, that has nothing to do with my family. Actually, yeah, all family, all musicians. Yeah. My father, my brother played xylophone, always had it in the house, so when he wouldn't be around, I was very athletic. I would boxing and playing football and baseball. When he wasn't around, I would doodle on his thing, you know?
Yeah.
And then I went up to, when I was about 11, so I went up to a resort where my brother was playing, and they used to have an amateur hour, or Monday night would be like, yeah, amateur hour style. But my brother was playing drums with the band, and when he wasn't around, I go into the casino, and I learned the Boulevard of Broken Dreams, that song, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, an old song. Anyhow, some lady, rich lady, came in and caught me playing. She says, "You got to play in the amateur hour." I said, "No, don't tell my brother. It's my fanny if you do that. You know, I'm not supposed to be touching this instrument." And she says, I got it. But anyhow, he found out about it. And that weekend, my sister happened to be visiting. And then when they told her I was going to be in an amateur hour, nobody knew I even played the instrument. Oh. Nobody, my brother didn't know it, my sister didn't know it. But I wouldn't wait around. I would doodle, you know. And she heard me play it, and I really played it well, and got me a teacher later on. Mm-hmm. And I went on to learn. And I Major Bowes amateur hour, and I've been on the road since then.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
That cliche, being at the right time at the right time, a lot of that has happened for me.
Yeah. You know? The music of the day when you were a youngster. Radio was extremely important, right? Is that where you got most of your exposure?
Well, no, I go to hear the big bands at the Paramount Theater and Strand Theater. Never in my born days did I ever think I would ever work with Benny Goodman. When I was a kid, I'd be the first one in line, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, to get in the Paramount Theater. And when that stage would go up in the old days, that people who don't know about Paramount Theater, that stage used to rise, and it would get up there, and while it was going up from the pit, Benny would be playing the theme song, Let's Dance.
Yeah.
My hair would stand up, and that was one of my favorite bands. And then when I got to work for him, it was amazing. And then when I got to work, I found out what an idiot he was. Complete foggy idiot. But he could play the clarinet.
He could. What's that? There's some story I heard about Gubenko, him calling someone...
He always called me Gubenko. He calls everybody Pops.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that. I know that maybe the story you're talking about. He always called everybody Pops, and he always called me Gubenko. He loved that name. Now, we're doing the Ed Sullivan Show. And this goes with actually, there's much more of a story than just Gubenko. We're doing the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was one show that Teddy Wilson couldn't be on because he had other commitments. So they hired a piano player called Bernie Layton. White guy, blondish hair. Now, Benny couldn't remember anybody's name ever. Now, we rehearsed all week with Ed Sullivan, playing out one song. We played the song, went off to the right. Played off, played one. Same song. You do that so the camera can get their shots, you know. And Benny didn't say one word to Bernie Layton this whole 7 days. They didn't even look at him. They didn't even know if Teddy Wilson wasn't there. They got him a piano player. Now it comes the showtime. We do the playing our song, and as we're playing, I suppose Ed Sullivan got the sign to stretch. On television, when they give you this, means we need a little more time. So all of a sudden, we finish our song, and Benny's about ready to walk to the right, and he says, "Hey, Benny." Now, Benny, that threw him a curve. Never heard that in rehearsal at all. Now, walking to the left threw him a curve, and Ed Sullivan was in left field himself. So you get two guys up there, and he says to Benny, "Benny, who's in the band?" Because he had to ask, kill some time. And Benny looks at the band and looks at me first, he tried to say Terry Gibbs. He tried his best. Gabenko. My mother loved it. My relatives loved it. Whoa, what a hit. But then he got the other guy's names, and he gets to Bernie Layton, and he looks at a piano player he hasn't even looked at all week, and he says on piano, Teddy Wilson. Now, we all made a double take. Now, the whole world knows that Teddy Wilson was a famous black piano player. Bernie is as white as you can get. When he said Teddy Wilson, the whole band made a double. We had to look and see who was playing piano. For an idiot on national, probably the biggest show on television at that time. But that's how. But when he said Gabenko, I can say my whole family, all the Jews in Brooklyn loved it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
He was pretty, I guess, just totally centered on the music. Was that
Benny?
what he was about? Yeah.
Yeah, he was really practice. You know, if he checked into a hotel, if he was on 3740, you went to 22, whatever, on the other side, because he practiced all day. He lived the clarinet. He was so foggy. Really, the only time he ever knew what he was doing was when he played the clarinet. He couldn't remember names.
How did he hold a band together? Was that someone else's job, really?
Well, he chose the musicians he wanted.
Uh-huh.
You know, we had a manager, of course, you know, that with the band. I'll tell you how foggy. Now Sid Weiss, a bass player that worked with Benny Goodman, he was on the old band, an old timer, and he told me that in the old days, because I really, Benny liked me, and I had a bad temper those days, and I almost hit him actually, and I would tell him, I used to call him, I can't use that the F word, but you foggy idiot, you know, you foggy idiot, because he would do some of the dumbest things, and I was just a kid, you know, I didn't know any. And Sid Weiss said nobody ever in his life ever talked to him because he didn't know anybody. One time, they were going to do a tour with Benny Goodman. They were trying to get all the original guys that were still alive, and this brings two stories. And Louis Armstrong Band. Before I tell you this, when I worked with him, I once asked him. I said, you know, I wanted to be around him all day. I was on all of him. I said, Benny, who was your favorite lead trumpet player? And I'm following around like a little kid, pull, you know, he said, Buddy Berrigan and Doug Medemy. I said, what'd you think of Harry James? He said, I didn't know him. And he walks away from me. I said, wait a minute. What, Harry James? Jerry Berrigan? I didn't know him. He didn't. Now, that's when Sid Weiss told me that he didn't know one guy from another. Now, they get this whole thing together. Joe Glazer, the agent, who was his agent, got as many guys as he can. George Yall got everybody. And the most important thing is that Benny said to Joe Glazer, get me Ziggy Elman. Now I came in with them to the rehearsal, and Benny looks at Joe Glazer, looks around the room. He said, I thought I told you to get me Ziggy Elman. That's Ziggy. What do you mean? I brought him in. That's not Ziggy Elman. What do you mean? Walked away. He didn't know Ziggy from Harry from Chris Griffin. He didn't know. He didn't know whose name was who. Oh, get me Ziggy Elman. But when it came to playing the clarinet, that was probably some of the most greatest thrills I ever had in my whole life. Because he can play.
Yeah, he really could. Let me go back a little bit. You did some service in World War II.
Yeah.
What kind of service did you do?
Well, it's wild. They don't tell you in the Army what you're going to do, you know?
Yeah.
Want me to tell you my first experience in the Army?
Yeah.
I was very young, and I couldn't talk to them. I can fight. I used to box. I wanted to be a fighter. And there was one, you know, when you first go in, they send you, I think, Fort Dix, the big camp where before they send you out to where you're going to go, they get thousands of guys there. And all you do is walk around picking up cigarette butts. They have to kill time till they find a place where you're going to go. Well, 39 years old, I think, was the age where you couldn't get in the Army after 39. And I was 18. And this one guy who was a PFC kept picking on this guy who, at that time, who I thought was an old guy, because I was 18, he was 39. I thought he was old. Now he could be my grandson. I thought he was old. And so he kept picking him. So I said, hey, listen, why don't you give the rest of us something to do? You know, it's an older guy. He takes me out and he says, hey, what's your name? I thought he was going to make me a sergeant meeting. I told him, Private George Gabenko. He said, what barracks? He took all the name. General the next day, you know. 4 o'clock in the morning. That guy, Gabenko, I said, you're on KP. So now, I know you have to do that, and you've served thousands of guys. And then whenever you serve them, then you go home usually. Gabenko and you guys stay there at the end, and you have to clean out the pots and pans. I'm talking about funky pots and pans. So I did that, and I went back to bed about 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning again, the same guy woke me up for KP, and I went through the same thing. Then the next night he did it again, and now I knew what he was doing because of what I did. And I said, listen, why don't we go outside and fight and get this over with, you know? There's no fighting, you do KP. He wouldn't fight me, and he had me do KP for 5 days until I didn't say a word. I mean, it taught me something until I finally got shipped out. But I was on KP, you name it.
Wow.
But then I got into guys who were about 24 years old were in bands. And 18, you were a baby, and they was much older than me too. I went into the 8th Armored Division as a tank driver. And you know, like I say, in the Army, they don't tell you what to do. So I was a tank driver, I was driving a tank. Then they put me in the band. They put me in the band because they needed, nobody played vibes. I wanted to play drums so bad, really, but nobody, they didn't have vibes, so they put me in the band. Now, the infiltration course is where they have barbed wire about this high, and you have to crawl underneath through mud with things exploding. And this is World War II, where there was no games. We had to beat Hitler and his gang, where they actually shot real bullets over your head, real bullets. Because if you stood up, you can get hurt and killed, but if you did it overseas, you can kill everybody else because of that. So that was the training. So I did that, and I was ready to go overseas. And they don't tell you anything. Private Banco, once again, they shipped me to Dallas, Texas. They put together a band to make music for Army pictures. They needed a percussion player. So I wound up playing drums band, which I wanted to do, with 30 strings and all, and a big thing. And I played some vibes once in a while, too, because I had a bunch of drummers. And I wound up writing a lot of arrangements and doing the whole thing. Never could get a rating, because I always was not. Also, that time, those days, we used to listen to Woody Herman's band on the radio, and Davey Tuff was playing drums. And when Davey would finish the song, there'd be a cutoff. He'd go, da-da-da, boom. He'd go, bum, 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 boom. He did some extra beats. So every time in a band, boy, I was hip, you know. Guy cut us off, and I go, boom, boom, boom. He says, hey, what are you doing? I gave you a cutoff. I said, yeah, but Davey Tuff. He said, I don't care what Davey Tuff or Woody Herman. And I couldn't get, I never could get, I think when I got discharged, like 80 years later, I was finally a corporal. I turned out to keep my mouth shut. If you're not the band leader, don't say anything. But it took a while.
I have the feeling you still have to get the last word in.
No. Only from the band. You know something?
Yeah.
When I worked for Steve Allen for years conducting, my job is to conduct, is a director, is a producer, whatever they have to tell me. But if it comes to my department, they hire me to do the job, I'll tell them. Otherwise, don't give me that job. And I'll take a lot of advice from musicians. You know, the thing is, but I don't do record. When I first moved to California, I'd go to do a record date, and there'd be some idiot up there, and we'd be doing 84 takes, and I'd want to say, make that an E flat, and that would solve the problem. We'd go straight ahead, but you can't do that because everybody wants to make overtime money. There's a business, you know. They say they're 20 hours because it gets to a certain time, double money. But I couldn't stand there, and so I never would do studio work because of that. It was, you know, the music would be, I didn't care about how good or bad it was because there was always good musicians playing it.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes the band leader, he didn't know it, because the guy who writes the arrangements sometimes, they're not band leaders half, and they're good arrangers. And sometimes when it came to the rock era, there'd be no music, they don't even know what they're doing. You give you a lead sheet, and you have to make up your own part half the time. But then again, you say to hours because he's not. It's an E flat chord. If he would just say E flat and we all played it, that would solve the whole problem. But he mentioned everything but E flat, and the guys love it because they go home with a lot of money. But that wasn't for me. The music has always been the most important thing.
Where did you learn the harmony required to play the?
Well, I studied with a legitimate teacher. I had a scholarship with the Juilliard as a timpanist. You want to hear one of my funny stories of timpanist?
Absolutely.
In school. You know, when you hear big symphonies and it all gets exciting, timpanists never have a lot to play. Sometimes you got to count 100 bars and then go ba 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 boom, ba boom, 100 bars and 60 more boom. And I used to, the band would also get exciting, and I used to sneak and make my own parts up. I'd make roll because they get exciting with the band. And every fifth day, I'd get caught. Every fifth day, the band leader would say to me, hey, Gabenko, he says, what are you doing? He says, letter C. I said, oh, letter C? I was letter D. He says, no, you idiot, we're letter C. So then for 5 days more, I played a part like it was written, boom, 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 and then I start sneaking more in, because I always thought there should be more timpanis. When the orchestra got exciting, that bottom with the timpani, you know. But that's how they write it. 5 days for him, 5 days for me.
Right. That's great. So you got some classical, quote, training.
Yeah.
And that allowed you to do some arranging later on.
Well, I learned, I did a lot of writing of song, a lot of writing of compositions. I've written about 300, and about 280 have been recorded.
Yeah.
A lot, but mostly by myself. But I've had Nat Cole record a few tunes, and Count Basie, and Woody Herman, and Cannonball Adderley, and George Shearing just recently recorded. I don't push my songs. I feel strange pushing songs on people, but sometimes they hear them and I get a call, did you write this, you know? Recently, in the last few years, Nat Cole recorded 2 of my tunes back in 1948. We were on tour with Woody Herman, and we were backstage. You know, everybody's through, band boys packing up, and they sit doodle on the piano, I'm doodling, and Nat was standing by me, and he said, what's that song? I said, it's the thing I wrote called Peaches. He said, hey, let me hear it. So I showed him the tune. He said, do you mind if I record it? That's when he had the trio, you know? I said, be my guest. And he said, you got anything else I'd like? So I showed him another one, and he recorded both of them. Now, I'm not sure how much it sold those days, but that was 1948. Now, and he died, and they weren't pushing his records. Now, Natalie Cole comes out with that Unforgettable with his dad, you know, her dad, and her piecing that thing together. So that made Nat a little hot to start re-releasing his records. And Peaches came out again, and that brought me a little money. And then George Shearing, about a year and a half ago, did an album called A Tribute to Nat Cole and recorded that song. Somebody told me years ago, never give away your publishing rights to anything. Can I drink while we're talking?
Please, yeah, absolutely.
Well, then give me something better than this. No.
Yeah. Oh, my. So, yeah, that's good because that stuff doesn't go away.
No,
you never know when it's coming back.
It's great. You know, when this happens, it made me feel good. The George Shearing, there were many more things he could have recorded, but he picked that tune.
Wow. You and Chubby Jackson. Now,
I have to laugh when I hear the name. He's out there. Chubby's out there.
Yeah.
Worst band leader in the world. Worst band leader for the simple reason that in the old days, he used to do 40 on, 20 off, 40 on, 20 off. We would do an hour and a half and then go away for an hour and a half. We never played the same place twice, ever. Band was swinging. Why get off after 40 minutes? Let's be talking and carrying on. He would never look at his watch to say we're back on again. By that time, the club owner would have us fired. You're out.
Yeah. Who else was in that group when you were playing with him?
With that little group?
Yeah.
We went to Sweden with that group. Connie Condoli, Lou Levy, and Frank Sokolow on tenor, and Denzel Best on drums.
Wow.
And Conte and Lou Levy both have played in my dream band, both of them.
Wow. What was your first reaction to Europe like the first time you went?
It was amazing. I mean, the reaction to the audience for the musicians, I didn't believe it. The first concert we played, after we got done, 84,000 flowers were put on stage. I never saw it for a jazz concert. I never saw that. A jazz musician, especially this was 1946, I think, or early 47. The jazz musician was treated like Toscanini. Got the same, like a symphony musician. Got the same feeling you got from the audience. They gave you that feeling of greatness and everything. You know, they appreciate what you did, and you were treated like with royalty. It's a little different now. You know, it's still good. They still love jazz there, you know.
Yeah, but it's not quite like you're conquering heroes or...
Well, it's not so much anymore.
Yeah.
The American has ruined it through the years of going there and taking, you know, the cocky American.
Yeah, okay.
Not really. Let's face it. The jazz musicians in America are the best. They are the best. So I think, and also, I think some of maybe the countrymen have resented the jazz musician, taking some of their ladies away, because you understand. So that wasn't a good thing either.
I see.
Not me. Not me. Thank God. I've been married now this time for 23 years, and my wife was the greatest thing that ever lived. Anybody would put up with me for 23 years. You know, we've got to be complete. Well, she's out of it probably. My wife is saying it. Don't make any sense. She doesn't understand half the things I say to her.
Really?
She's still trying to figure me out. That's why she's with me.
Well, that's right. I hope she never does.
Another
right?
25 years, she's like, I know what he said 20 years ago now. It'll come to her.
I read a humorous anecdote about you and Buddy Rich.
About the Leave Me in the Desert?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been amazing. I'm
No, it's
doing a
been
book. I'm doing a book right now.
Good. You should
And
do a book.
the first chapter has been sent in. I gave them the television chapter because they know I'm a jazz musician. There'll be a lot of jazz musicians. And I gave them the Steve Allens and Regis Philbins
Right.
and Don Rickles and Milton Berles and all the things I had something to do with my
Right.
television experience. So they liked it. Now when I get back to, I'm writing with a gentleman called Carrie Janelle, who produced an NPR show for a Nancy Wilson thing for my 75th birthday, and he's editing this thing with me. So we just did a chapter which they wanted on the Woody Herman Four Brothers Band.
Yeah.
And I could talk about things now,
Right.
but I couldn't 10 years ago because unfortunately, there was a lot of dope in that band.
Yeah.
A lot of junkies, sick guys, which I wouldn't talk about and mention names. But I can talk about it now because I look for humor in everything. Things that weren't funny now, then I can look now and they were funny but tragic at the same time.
Yeah. Did some of the fellas that were into that suffer later on, even
yeah.
if they got over it?
They all, Stan Getz, Zeus Sims, Al Cohn, and Sir Shalif all died, I think, from cirrhosis of the liver.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they quit, even when they quit though, they quit making hard. They were all drinking. You stop. So Stan Getz would drink a fifth of liquor and wouldn't bother him like it would a guy who never made that.
Yeah.
But they were all straight later on.
Uh-huh.
But I think what happened is it affected them.
Yeah.
It affected them because it stays in your system, I suppose. Thank God I never did that. And let me tell you one of the reasons, two things. I like to laugh. And all the junkies I've seen, they laugh, they're just like falling asleep. And the second reason, which is the most important reason, is I am afraid of a needle. When I go to the doctor for a shot of my fanny penicillin, he's got to catch me. Before I get he's got to catch me, then I'll take that thing if I get a cold. Needles don't do anything for me.
Uh-huh.
Not my favorite thing in the world.
It must have been hard for Woody to
He put up.
deal with that.
I admire him so much because he put up with so much, and the reason he put up with it, that was the greatest band in the world that time. The greatest band. It was so great that instead of playing one-night stands and barns or ballroom, whatever, where you make your money, we stayed at the Royal Roost in New York for a month, in California, the Empire Room for a month, Chicago, the Blue Note for a month, and you can't make any money in nightclubs. No way can you pay a 16, 17-piece band and come out. No way can you do it. And so he'd lose money all the time, but he was so proud of that band.
Oh.
Really, because it was the greatest band in the world. Every one of those guys who were in that band, the Four Brothers Band, went on to become big jazz stars, or movie picture writers, arrangers, or.
Yeah, you were playing some great arrangements. Huh?
Shorty Rogers, Ralph Burns, Johnny Mandel, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
You got Neil Hefti. You go down the list of guys. Neil Hefti, two of my close friends, Neil Hefti, and Johnny Mandel even more than Neil because I sort of grew up with Johnny. He was my roommate on the Buddy Rich Band. They make so much money on not so much on the songs that they wrote that are popular, like, for example, The Shadow of Your Smile, Emily, Time for Love, that Johnny Mandel wrote, and Neil wrote Cute and Little Darling and all these things. They wrote theme songs for two of the biggest shows that are being played all over the world now. We're keeping. Neil wrote the Odd Couple theme song, and Johnny wrote MASH.
Oh.
So that goes on. The royalties coming for that every time, all over the world. That keeps being played.
Good
And
deal.
they're both good guys, so
Yeah.
I'm happy for both of them.
Yeah. A lot of sometimes the names that would show up as you watch those things would really surprise me. Like, I'm forgetting who did Batman.
Neil Hefti.
Neil Hefti, right?
You know what's what he told me, which is wild, just recently. Now, The Odd Couple is being played every time Europe, you name it, anywhere. I see it all the time. But he told me he makes more money from Batman. And he's such a giant arranger, and harmonically he can write all these things.
Yeah.
Batman is like the dumbest thing. It's like one note. Batman, and all kinds of sounds. And he made a fortune with
Right.
that.
Well, it fit the TV
Oh,
show
yeah.
for sure.
Oh yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Wow. What prompted you to move from one coast to the other?
Well, I got burned out to start with. I was married to a lady, and we got divorced because I met her in California. We got married. I was 24. She was about 18. Moved to California, and I'd leave her here. I live in New York. I leave her here. I go on the road for 8, 9 months at a time, and we had no life. I mean, I was bad. I was really bad those days. And so we got divorced, and about 6 months later, we started talking again. You know, saying if I would stay home more, maybe we could work it out. So, and I was really burnt out with a group I had for 4 years on the road, working anywhere 48 to 52 weeks a year. It was hot. We were really, like I said, with Birdland 6 months a year, rest of the time on the road. So I figured we'll move out to California, because she was from California, and I'll do studio work, and we'll see what can happen, you know. And I moved out to California, and I was burnt out, and I was ready to do studio work. And because I play all the percussion instruments. And the wildest thing, I called a guy called Al Lappin, who was the biggest contractor. He was NBC, the biggest contractor at NBC, plus a million other things. And he knew my father. So I called, and he knew my reputation. So I called him and I asked him, I'd like to go on staff. He says, I don't know. He says, I got 82 musicians. I don't know if we can use any more musicians. So 2 weeks went by where from being burnt out, I rejuvenated. I got all that energy, and I found out now that if you go on staff, you can't play clubs or anything, because they had what they called a quota. They wanted all the musicians to work, and all the best musicians in the studios, they would also work clubs, and the younger guys wouldn't have the jobs. It was a quota. So I found out if I went on staff, and I was ready, having a nervous breakdown, not playing for 2 weeks. And so Al Lappin called me back, and he says, I'm going to put you on staff. I said, listen, Al, I have to have a double check. You won't believe it. I can't. You won't believe the only guys getting double checks. Are you kidding? Are you crazy? And he mentioned 2 guys: Conrad Garza, who was a lead trump player, and Irv Kotler, who played drums with Frank Sinatra for 20 years. Are you kidding? Forget about it. Goodbye. Hung up on me. I get a call about 3 days later, and then he said, "Listen, I'm going to put you on staff." And I knew the reason why. The reason why was because I used to do these television, like Dinah Shore show, as a guest. Now, they don't have to pay me because they can put me on the shows. So he was going to put me on. So in the long run, NBC would save money. Then I had to tell him, Al, I said, I love you and all, but I can't do it only because I still got to play some jazz, and being on staff, I couldn't. But I went through a scene with him for 3 weeks. You wouldn't believe how he screamed, yelled. He was so powerful. Most powerful contractor we ever had in the show in NBC. Out of all of NBC, all the orchestras, plus all record days and everything else. If I ever went on NBC, I could have done millions of record days because he would like what I done, you know.
Yeah.
But I had to play. We're back to the music. See?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about what possessed you to try to get your dream band going, big band.
That was just a fluke. It was the biggest fluke. I recorded a band in New York in 1956 or something, and I was sick because it wasn't good. Not to me, it wasn't good. I used the same rhythm section that was my little group. I always try to use the guys who would travel me and kill themselves on the road, give them a good job. If I did a TV show, instead of using the quartet, 3 of the guys from the house band, I want my guys on it. I always try to push them on there. So I put him on the big grand record date, and the most important thing is the drummer, and he didn't know how to play with a big band. No. And we did it. I went to the first date. I was sick. Nothing was happening. We had the greatest players. I had all the guys that used to be Woody Band, all the greatest players in New York. Great Ernie Wilkins writing, Manny Albin, Johnny Mandel, all the best arrangers. And it was so bad that it got me sick. I caught a cold, and the best thing about it, the drummer, I don't want to mention his name because he's not alive anyhow, he came over to me after the first record and he says, Terry, I don't think I'm making it. If you want me another drummer, go ahead. And I thanked him, and I got O.C. Johnson, who was one of the better drummers those days. But by that time, I was so sick that mentally it screwed me up because it's something I wanted to do all my life. Oh. It was so, nothing, the record I hear now, it's not bad, but nothing compared to what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And so I didn't play on the date. I was there and conducted the whole thing. I I overdubbed all my choruses because I couldn't play. It just threw me off. But then the Dream Band, how that happened, I was moved out to California and had a great contract with Mercury. I almost could record any time I had an idea of something different. I could do 4 or 5 albums a year.
Gee.
Now, Bill Holman had a rehearsal band, and Med Flory had a rehearsal band. And I liked what I heard, and I had an idea. The idea was I was going to hire 6 different arrangers and pay tribute to 6 different band leaders like Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, Count Basie, Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, and Artie Shaw. And I was going to take something out of each arrangement, like Artie Shaw's clarinet chorus on Stardust, just the first 16 bars, and somewhere would sneak it in the arrangement, or part of Ben Webster's chorus and Cottontail, whatever, you know. And I hired the arrangers that I thought would write for those guys. I put Bill Holman write the Artie Shaw thing because Bill had that melodic kind of thing, even though they all had melodic things. Al Cohen, I gave him the Duke Ellington things, and Manny Album, the bassy things, you know. I gave it to the guys I thought would do it. Now I get all this music ready to rehearse it. And once again, I found out in California that you cannot rehearse for a record date. I won't mention the guy's name, a very famous guy was fined $1,000. It's like 20, getting fined 20 today for rehearsing for a record date, because they want you to go in the studio and make the money overtime. The union wants you to make the money. You know, you can rehearse the song 25 times until you get it right.
But they want you in the studio.
Yeah, well, I was going to do this in the studio. This was done in the studio.
Oh.
But they want you in the studio, not rehearsing in a hall, you know, somewhere.
Right.
So I got that. So that threw me off. I had all this music. In the meantime, there was a club that was in a close called the Seville, and the movie columnist called Eve Starr took a liking to how I played, and she knew the club owner at the Seville, and they were going to go out of business. They tried Latin, they tried all this. They never tried jazz, so they hired me with a quintet. They said 5 musicians. Now, being out of town, I got decent money. The scale was only $15, but I got much more than that. And we did, on a Tuesday night, we did fairly good for them. And so we did it again next Tuesday. In the meantime, I heard that you're allowed to rehearse for a nightclub engagement, even though you're not rehearsing for a record day. So what I did is, I said to the guy, how'd you like to have a 15-piece band for what you're paying me for 5 musicians? Because I had enough, the scale was $15 that time. I had enough to pay everybody's scale. He said, I don't care if you get $4 million. He says, we don't do any business, I'm going to close anyhow. So I got a chance to rehearse. We expected 20 people, 25 people to come in the club. Place holds 300, you know. The 20 people would have paid enough to maybe with drinking and all to pay the tab, which would have been the quintet. Steve Allen at that time was just a friend of mine. I didn't work for him. He gave me a little plug. We recorded all day. I rehearsed it all, and we rehearsed for 2-3 days. Went in the club. Sure enough, like I thought, after all day, 20 people. That's all we expected. Went in the back room, because all we had was 12 arrangements that we recorded, and those days did in 3 and 4 shows a night. So we went in the back room with the 12 pieces of music, and I said, on this song, on letter B, Conte, you play 100 choruses. On C, Frank Rosalino, you got 2,000 choruses. We had to open up. We'll make backgrounds, you know. Yeah. And so we started to walk out to play, and there were 300 people packed in the club with a line waiting to get, and you saw faces like Fred McMurray, Ginger Rogers. You saw all these movie stars, and you saw all the musicians in town. So I called the band back in the dressing room. I said, we're starting a band tonight, but there's one rule. There's no drinking off the bandstand. If you want to drink, you have to drink on stage. You never saw a wilder scene in your life. The audience couldn't get a drink. I'm ready to tap it off. Med Flory said, here, I have to have a beer, Terry. Wait a second. Waitress. We'd have 5 waitresses on stage, giving everybody beers, whatever they drink. Audience is waiting for a drink. But you couldn't get in the club. And immediately, we were the talk of Hollywood. So we said, let's do it again next week. Sure enough, we come to work, 9:30, 20 people. We figured it was a fluke. Went in the back room. By that time, Bill Holman let me arrange it too. Med Flory let me arrange. I had about 16 arrangements. Had to talk over what we're going to do with that. And by the time we came out to play at 10 o'clock, couldn't get in. Packed with line around the corner. It was ridiculous. More movie stars. Johnny, you know, Luella Parsons. You know that name?
Yeah.
She was an old-time movie columnist who could make you and break you, you know, in movie business. She'd be sitting there. It didn't make any sense to people who were coming to see the band. And we were the heroes. We played $15 a night, and our bar tabs were 23. So, you got to be an idiot to do that. We were having so much fun. We didn't care about the music. And that went on for about 5 weeks in a row, Mondays or maybe 2 nights a week. Then the club owner said, why don't we do this 5 nights a week? Starting, I said, you really want to try? Yeah. He said, well, let's do it. In the meantime, I didn't realize that Count Basie was opening right down about 2 blocks down at a place called the Crescendo. Now, it's a hard thing to say, but we got scared. But we outdrew Basie's band to a point where his band were in our club every time they had an intermission. They were all there. They didn't believe the band. Nobody did. I mean, it was one of the things that was such a hit then. But then again, once again, after I gave up the band in 1962, that was the end of that. And in 1980s, and Buddy Rich and Shorty Rogers would come over to my house. So I had these tapes. When I recorded the band, actually for records, Wally Hyder recorded the band. I auditioned Wally Hyder at the Seville. I heard about him, and I wanted to hear what he did. So he came in the club, and he recorded the band, because I wanted to do a live album. And we'd go back to the studio, and he'd play it for me, and I said, Wally, that's 95% good, but let me tell you what I need now. I'm the band lead. There's something I wanted to hear. You know, right or wrong, I want to hear something that I want. To start with, you hear how the lead trumpet player, you can hear him so well. Yeah, I said, now let me hear the 4th trumpet player just as well. All 4 trumpets on the same level. I want to hear the sound of a band, not protruding notes. Now, great. Now you hear, in the old days, by the way, it was hard to record a bass. Yeah. All you heard was boom, 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 because everything was done almost in 1 track. I mean, or not even 2 tracks, just put into the thing. So I brought him a record of Jack the Bear by Duke Ellington. Yeah. It was so ding, gong, ding, gong. I said, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear notes. Now, the next thing, I don't want to feel the drums. You put the drums up front. That's the fire of the whole band. Put Mel Lewis up in front. We came in the next day, did that. Came in for a few days, did that. Perfect. Then we by that time we moved to another club to record, and I had all these tapes in my house. And what it was songs that we played before, that we recorded before. For 27 years I had those tapes in my house, and everybody Rich would come over, Shorty Rogers, and I had them on reel-to-reel. Yeah. And they said, why don't you put these out? It's the greatest band in the world. I said, it's only for you and I listen to. Forget about it. And then all of a sudden, bands started to make noise. Rob McConnell, Bob Florence, Frank Capra, and I'm sitting with the greatest thing. So I figured, well, and also another thing, that it was the days of records and cassettes. And by the time we opened up our things, it would start out to be an ensemble band. Of course, after we all opened it up for solos, like I said, the last 4 minutes was ensemble. We went home hollering, the whole band. Now, the records, the tapes that the Wally Hyder recorded when we opened up, they were like 15 minutes each. And records, you can only put about 20 minutes on each side. Now, I didn't want to cut them because some of the greatest soloists, so I wouldn't do it. Then in 1986, Dick Bach, who owned Pacific Records, heard the records, and he said, Terry, first Gene Norman, you know who Gene Norman is? He's got a record label called Crescendo, but he owned the Crescendo nightclub that I worked at with Woody Herman's band. He heard them, he wanted to buy them all. No, he wanted to buy them, but I said, I'll sell them to you if you put it out as a 4-package set without cutting them up. He said, I can't make any money on that, Terry. I got to chop this up so I can make a record out of it. No. I said, forget about it. Unless you buy all 4 as a package set. And he offered me a lot of money, and I passed. Then all these bands came out, and Dick Bach came and said, Terry, and he's a great editor. He says, let me show you something. And he, for example, he took Opus No. 1, where there was a battle. It was about 15 minutes long, and about 9 minutes of it was Joe Maney and Charlie Kennedy, the 2 alto players playing 2 choruses each, then 1 each, then 16 bars each, then 8 bars each, 4 bars each, 2 bars, 1 bar each, and then into the next thing, then me. And I didn't want that cut out. He said, let me show you, let me do something for you. Don't listen to those things at all anymore, which I hardly ever did because they were on reel-to-reel. And he cut it to where we made it into a 5-minute thing, where almost like it started out to be ensemble band. It was like ensemble, because that was what made the band. Even though we had the greatest soloists, it was the fire of the ensemble because they played so well together. I mean, you can find a lot of bands playing, but not everybody thought like we did. If you took each guy out in the band in the street and said, who's your favorite alto player, who's your favorite trumpet player, favorite piano player, same names: Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell. That was our idols. So because of loving the same people, we all felt the same way about the music. So Dick Bach anyhow did that, And I did miss the rest of the choruses, but he really knew how to cut it. He cut it great. So I agreed to do that. And all I got was $2,500. I paid all the guys myself to put out. But I did have the Youth Fantasy, and I made very good friends with Ralph Kaffel later on, the president of Fantasy, who's one of my close friends now. He gave me the use of the Fantasy telephone, their number, to charge every phone call, to make sure I can call every disc jockey in the world, to charge it to them, to make sure if they don't have a CD, they'll get one immediately. So I used to get up 6 o'clock in the morning. First of all, what happened is when the record first came out, we had 2 radio stations in California, 2 jazz stations. I put on one, and all of a sudden I hear 5 of the songs. Then I put on the other one, and I hear 4 or 5 more. It became the biggest hit. In California, they were playing it, but I didn't know they were playing it all over. But I would call every disc jockey, and if they didn't have one, I'd have to get up 6 o'clock in the morning in California, because here it's 9 o'clock, you know, on the West Coast. And in Europe, it's another time. So sometimes I'd be sitting there at 6 o'clock in the morning in my underwear, and it would be like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm still sitting there with underwear. I hadn't had anything to eat on the phone, because I didn't believe what was happening. And the band made a success all over the world, to a point where when Buddy and I went to Europe the last time, we did about 16, 17 one-nighters to England, and the promoter brought our CDs that Buddy and I did to sell. And the Europeans are, they're very brave. They just walk in your dressing room. I mean, they just walk in, they do and knock on the door, walk in to sign autographs, you know. And not only did they come with the Buddy DeFranco Terry Gibbs album, but every little town, everybody would have all 5 CDs of the Dream Band. At least 4 or 5 guys in every town. I never knew it got out that far. And it really made that much noise. Now I have, what's wild, they're being sold copies of the original arrangements. No new copies are being made of the things that Joe Maney marked in and what Mel Lewis marked in and Frank Reznor, just like there was. It's being sold. Dave Pell, who has the octet, he distributes them for me.
Right. That's great.
Yeah, and colleges are buying them up left and right. I was just doing the clinic, and a few of the college people said, "Are you kidding? We already bought 14, you know, and 15." Because they don't write arrangements like that anymore. They're just straight ahead swing music. And especially if you want to show the band off, if you play the arrangements like it's really written, because it was, I actually patterned the band after the Benny Goodman band, because Benny played in and out, because it didn't blend with the section. It did, but it would sound like Glenn Miller with the clarinet and saxes. And Vibes, it just was a Bassett instrument. So I wrote it, they were all written where Vibes go in and out, you know. So if you play it down just like it's written, a lot of ensemble. I said, give me a lot of ensemble. I got 16 men, I want to have 16 musicians, you know.
Wow.
So the band really hit big, but that's how it happened, by a fluke thing. Then the band, all of a sudden, you couldn't get anywhere we played. Even today, there's about 4 guys, 5 guys that are still left from the original, because most of them are dead. A lot of them are dead. Unfortunately, Richie Camuca is dead, Mel Lewis is dead, Buddy Clark is dead, Joe Maney is dead, Ray Triscari, Stu Williams, you know, Frank Rossellino. But there's guys who've been working for me for 30 years now when I put the band together. And so every once in a while, that cliche, when they make me an offer I can't refuse. But now they're all leaders, by the way. Med Flory, Frank Capp. When they make me an offer I can't refuse, because I refuse to not pay a guy, because they've been with me for 40 years, where they'll work around town locally for $70 or $100 to have fun with bands. I won't take a job unless I can pay them 3 and 4 times that much amount of money. And so, and I want to make some money, so cliche, when they make me an offer, I can't refuse, I put the band together. And it's the biggest headache in the world. Because I got 17 band leaders, and but I like that. The music they take serious. When I go to make an announcement, I love if they become a bunch of idiots and scream and yell and whatever they want to do. Because the audience loves that. In fact, the last concert we just did 2 months ago, Med Flory, things just happen in my band that start off something with an audience or rapport. It happens immediately. I say some dumb thing when I first come out, and we have an arrangement, Opus number 1, that opened up. We play, then there's a little interlude, and then there's a battle between the altos. Med Flory plays 2 choruses, Lonnie Morgan plays 2 choruses, then it goes like same thing, 8s, 4s, 2s, and 1s. And Med was tired that night. So we're playing the first chorus. Now it gets to the point where he's got to play his alto chorus, and I don't know what the hell he is. I see him pick up the clarinet. he forgot to turn the page. So the next page, he has to play the clarinet. Now he's playing all alone because he was playing an alto. So, and he said, then he picked up the alto. So the audience immediately broke up, and it happened. And what even made him better, he still forgot to turn the page over. So he came in again, and then I have to play after that. I had, the visor to play. Then comes the clarinet. So he's picking up the clarinet, and he's playing all alone while I'm playing my solo. Then he realized what he's doing. Once again, the audience fell out. And you know what? That was a standard thing through the whole hour and a half we did. I'd ask Med, let us see anything you want, Terry. And he's funny.
Yeah.
And Ned's very funny.
Cool.
All the guys,
Wow.
I play straight man for everybody in that band.
That's great stories.
Oh, I love these. I love that band for that.
Yeah. Let me play something for you
Okay.
from your past.
Oh, God, it'll probably be terrible. I hate things I did in the past. Is that Gus Pavona myself? At Joe Passanak's house. Is that what?
That's right. That's right. I found that they have this.
Allen's
remember
All
that one?
Stars.
Yeah.
It was wild. Pete Rugolo was then the A&R person. Producer was called the artist and repertoire man. He was a producer. And I wanted to do a live day because Steve and I became very good friends.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was living in New York, and he bought a home in California. And every time he come to visit his children, he'd give me a call. It was empty. And I'd call, and we jam. And I got bugged when Jay moved out with him, they made a house out of it. Took away our jam session house. They put furniture in and ruined the whole house. So when Steve came out one time, I said, let's do something. So I told Pete Rugolo, we should do a live date somewhere at a party. And Pete was in with all the Hollywood crowd. And I don't think many of the young people or older people may not remember the name Joe Passanak. He was the biggest producer of musicals, Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, all those musicals he produced. So we did it at his house. And he loved it. We did it at his house and had fun.
Yeah. Sounds great.
It was a party.
You were.
I hate to listen to old things I did.
Do you?
Yeah. Well, I don't hate to, but what's good about listening, I remember that time. What was going on in my life at that time. It was a fun time.
Good. Good.
Yeah. In fact, that size band is what I used when I was conducting with Steve. The sextet. With the clarinet, guitar, and vibes, and piano, bass, and drums.
How did you get to know him?
Well, I got to know him. He was a fan of mine. That's right. Keep bringing him in.
Yeah. There you
Stop
go.
putting all that vodka in this. I quit drinking years ago. I thank you very much, Eddie. He was a fan of mine. He used to come into New York when I played Birdland. He'd come in all the time to hear me. And when I moved out to Cali, he'd come in to see me playing all the time. And I moved back to New York for almost a year, and I got called. He was doing a television show, and I got called by. He quit the show, by the way. He quit the show. He had some kind of scene with Westinghouse. Boom, he quit, and they brought this young kid in, Regis Philbin, that he was going to start next week. And the people who produced the Steve Allen show liked when I appeared as a guest with Steve. They liked my dumb sense of humor, what I did, and they know I can play. And they didn't care if I knew how to conduct or anything. They called me and asked me if I would audition. Not playing. I'd be the second banana, as a band leader, with what kind of rapport I'd have with Regis. And two other guys were Bobby Troop. I didn't know this till later. And Ray Anthony, both up for the job. But they liked what I had to say, And then they wanted to give me a 9-piece band. Great, you got the job, 9-piece band. That's what Steve had. I said, no, I don't want the job with 9 pieces. First of all, we're on at night opposite Les Crane. That time we had Elliot Lawrence with 16 pieces, and Johnny Carson, who had Jock Sevens. And I said, we have 9 pieces. We're going to try to sound like 16. I said, either give me 16 or give me a sextet, and we won't be in competition with anybody. They said, can you make it work with 6? I said, I'll make it work, no problem. And so the Regis Philbin show, and by the way, he's one of the nicest people living. I taped one of his shows about a month ago, which will be shown sometime in January. I'm not sure when this is going to be shown, but sometime in January it will be shown. And we got along great. In fact, I was the other second band, and Regis wasn't hip to jazz at all. He really didn't know much about jazz. And we'd have Count Basie. And they weren't fair to Regis, really, because all the guests that were booked for the first 10 weeks probably were Steve Allen's guests that were booked a long time ago.
Yeah.
And Regis is not, that's not his bag. Jazz people's not his bag. We'd have Sarah Vaughan, Count Basie, you know, Oscar Peterson, we had all the heavyweight players. And we had Count Basie. I remember when we had Count Basie. Count Basie is the worst interview in the world. He can yes or no you to death. You know, when you, if you were sitting here with me and I kept saying, yes, because I say yes, no, you can have a nervous breakdown after a while. So Regis, they asked him a question, yes, no. Asked him 5 in the final. He said, Regis, I want to ask Basie a question. He said, come on now, Terry. I went down and said, Basie, when we played in Detroit that time, remember that scene with Pee Wee Marquette? Tell Regis, you got to tell a story now.
Okay.
So every time we had a jazz musician, Stan Getz, every time he interviewed, I had to be down there with him. He was really great. That wasn't his bag. I used to put him on all the time. He always thought that we were putting him on because we were jazz players, but we really loved him. He loved the band. He always praised the band.
Well, Steve Allen was.
And then let me get you mentioned about Steve Allen. Let me get back. I don't want to interrupt you because you asked me how I got with Steve. Then Steve asked me if I would conduct for him. I had another show coming up. By that time, I was ready to sit down and settle down. He first asked me actually if I would go to Las Vegas with him, because I taught Steve how to play vibes, and we used to close our show playing the vibes. I taught him how to do that, and he'd come to the club and we do that. So he thought it'd be good in the show. I would play. I'd play a song I had written up on I Got Rhythm and Arrangement. I'd play piano with him. Then I'd play a ballad and show all the technique and everything. Then he'd play, and I taught him, it's all hands. So whatever I did, he did just as well. And people thought he was just as good as I was, you know. So we went to Vegas and we closed with that. You know, we'd close every show. Then he asked me if I'd like to conduct a television show for him. And so at that time, the people who I worked with on the Regis Philbin show, a guy called Bill Carruthers, became a big producer, director with Chuck Barris. And they asked me if I would conduct a band for a show called Operation Entertainment. And I already was committed to that, so I did that. And then when I got done with that, then Steve asked me if I would conduct for him, and then I went with Steve and stayed with him for 15, 16 years. We played a lot of nightclubs all over the country and television, you know.
Yeah.
And he was fun to be with, especially at nightclubs, because he's not like he's not like a comedian who tells jokes. If the chandelier fell down, 10 more minutes to his act. He looks at anything that goes wrong. In fact, when we used to rehearse the band in the afternoon, if a guy came in wearing a weird cap and weird, whatever he was wearing weird, they had to wear tuxedos. I have him wear that cap. I'd have him, whatever how weird it would look, he'd love that. Anything he'd turn around, look at the band, he'd break up, you know. And so he'd work to the band sometimes.
Yeah.
He'd turn around, work to the band.
Man.
Yeah, we got along real great. Well, we had Jonathan Winters on the show one time. And you know Jonathan's mind, right? He's out. Jonathan's really out there. And the premise of this whole thing was, it's probably in July, we were doing a Christmas show. And the premise was that Jonathan had a clay piggy bank that he was returning. Steve Allen was behind the counter. And Steve, he came off the counter, and he was next in line. And he says, yes, sir. And he says, what's wrong with that? And all of a sudden, Jonathan there's a Christmas show, went to Japan. All of a sudden, he's talking about some far out thing. He went somewhere else, completely nothing to do with it. And when he finished, and Steve went right with him. Wherever he went, he went to Yugoslavia. Whatever he was talking about, for about 20 minutes, Steve went with him. Everywhere he went, Steve went with him until the cue came up from the producer. Christmas show. You know, we got to go back to. So he went back. But why are you returning the pig? And we got our Christmas show. So what they did out of that 20 minutes, they took 8 minutes out of each. He went to Japan, Yugoslavia, Germany, whatever he went, they took 8 minutes of what he was talking about and put it in 6 different shows.
Oh my God.
And all brilliant, all 8 minutes of brilliance, because Jonathan Winters is a monster mind. He's out there, completely out there.
And I guess if you had to pick somebody to hang out with him like that.
And Steve is the greatest straight man. The greatest straight man. Yeah. He doesn't care to get the laugh. He just laughs. He laughs at you. He cackles through everything you're saying, you know. And Jonathan, I'm telling you, when the first thing, when he asked, why are you returning this pig? His first answer had nothing to do with the show. Had nothing to do with Christmas, had nothing to do with the pig. He was mother-in-law back in Chicago, whatever he went. I don't even.
Great. Is that stuff still on tape, I think? Is it gettable? Can you watch those things now?
Oh, I have some at home that Steve gave me of some of the shows we've done. they're priceless. I mean,
Yeah.
he wrote one time he wrote an 11-minute bit, a hip version of The Taming of the Shrew, with hip words, but every word ended with TH. Thou art fearfully with, is you not my baby? It was so dumb. I mean, it was so dumb. You fell on the floor. You just couldn't go through it.
I wanted to ask you about.
We'll get there.
I have some little things that
Yeah?
I dug up. Something about you calling Dorsey a bad name or something. What was that about?
No, I didn't call Dorsey a bad name ever. He called me a bad name. But,
Oh, okay.
But it really wasn't.
Oh, Dorsey calling you a bad name.
But
That's
but
what
it,
it was.
wasn't really. They called everybody. And then what happened actually? I got a call. Now I'm working. This is 1947. If I worked 3 days a year, I was doing well. I was an unknown, playing on 52nd Street once in a while, learning, trying to learn bebop. Charlie Parker. And I get a call from the Tommy Dorsey office. Well, I joined the Tommy Dorsey band. $165 a week. Now I was making $165 every 2 years. So so he would fly me out there, everything first class, and my mother wouldn't let me fly. And you got to listen to your mother those days. But so he got me a compartment on a train. 5 days I was in a compartment, going nuts. You got that all that energy. I was only about 22, 23. I got out to California. They picked me up at the railroad station and whisked me out right to Casino Ballroom in Santa Monica. And they set up the vibes. I set them up, and I played one tune before the intermission. And it felt terrible. I mean, I was trying to learn bebop, and he was playing Song of Vinny, all these old things. It had nothing to do with what I was trying to do. But I did get to meet Louis Bellson, which I didn't know,
Yeah.
and Charlie Shavers, and Ziggy Elman.
Uh-huh.
And intermission, I just got there. Now, you got to remember, 15 minutes, I went over to the manager. I said, Mr. Jacobs, I don't know how to tell you this, but I got to give you my notice. He said, wait a minute, you just got here. He said, what happened? I said, I tried to explain Dizzy Gillespie, I'm trying to learn this. Now, when you quit a band, you got to pay your own way home. If you get fired, the band lead has to pay your way home. Now, in those days, nobody ever quit Tommy Dorsey or Benny Goodman. They fired you. You wanted to stay. You wanted to stay with those bands for the rest of your life because it was the best music and the best jobs. Anyhow, Tommy, can I use some of the words on here?
Yeah, sure.
It's really not that dirty.
Yeah.
I'm standing there talking to Louis Bellson and Charlie Shavers, and I get a tap on the shoulder. Now, I used to box, by the way. And if somebody tapped me, if that was the wrong tap, I would have turned around and hit him without even knowing what it was. But I turned around, ready to protect myself, and Tommy was about 6'2", 6'3", but he looked about 9 foot tall, because he looked down at me with hatred. He says, "You little shithead, you just quit my band." And I tried to say, Mr. Dorsey, Charlie Party, I don't give a shit about that. He said, nobody quits my band. You're fired. I said, well, if you fired me, you got to pay my way home. There's no you quit. And walked away from me. So that's my play. But he wouldn't let me go home. I sat there 2 weeks. Let me play. The only time I ever played is he was doing a movie picture, and he'd leave the last set, and Ziggy Elman would take over the band, and he let me play a little bit. Otherwise, I never played. Sat there, turned pages, and bass player.
For 2 weeks.
Jeez. And you know what's wild? How I got home. Louis Bellson was on the same picture with Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey. I think it was with Danny Kaye, that picture they did years ago. The Red Nickel Story, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
5 pennies.
Yeah, 5 pennies.
They were all on that thing. And Benny was on, and Louis wanted Benny to hear me play. So Louis Bellson and a guy, Bill Miller, who was Frank Sinatra's piano player, he was playing piano on Tommy's band. I forget the bass player. We stayed over after the show, the job was over, and we made a tape for Benny to hear me play. He wanted Benny to hear me play. Now, Benny would, Tommy would get no sleep. He'd go right from there, and Benny left to play all the time. So while they say cut, for whatever scene they're shooting, he started playing. When we started playing, Lionel would jump in because can't stop Lionel at all. And Tommy said, "Come on, Benny, stop that bullshit." He says, I haven't slept at all. So Benny put the clarinet down. 3.5 minutes later, he'd forget completely and start playing again. And Tommy said, God damn, that moment he'd do, by the way, Lionel would jump in. He's like, God damn, Benny, he says, I told you to put that clarinet away. Maybe this time he waited about 4 minutes. Stopped playing, and Tommy went over and hit him, knocked him down. Now, so the record never got to Benny Goodman. But Louis played it for Lionel Hampton. So Lionel called me. And he says, Louis gave me a record that He said, you got to play my band. He said, you tell me you play drums also. Got to play drums in my band, and I'll give you 12 solos. I'll be my protege. Hey, Gates. So I figured, great, you know. Then later on, his wife called. Now, he had nothing to worry about because even though I was a kid, well, I don't have to wipe anybody out with his commercial. He would jump over 4 tom-toms, hit an A-flat. You know, he's in show business.
Yeah.
Well, you can't cap him. It came down to me like 4 solos after we talked, and then no solo. They want me to just play drums. And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So they paid my way home. So that's how I got back.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Well, you really knew your mind, what you wanted to do, and
I always wanted. It was something I wanted to learn. I almost had a nervous breakdown the first time I heard Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. It was something so new to me, something I was looking for all my life, because I had all this technique and didn't know what to do with it. And my idols were Roy Eldridge and Leslie Young. They played so pretty and simple, you know. And I had all this technique, so I gave up playing fives and played drums. And when I heard Bird and Diz, I said, what is that? Because they played all these technique things, and I was in the Army at that time. And I listened for 15. I went back and played 4 million notes. Maybe 3 were right. Maybe. But I knew the timing. I get the timing down.
wow.
That was my whole life. Music's always been my whole life. So I wouldn't be sitting, Monk, seriously. I don't even mind admitting I'm 76 years old now, but the body of a man is 75, of course, you know. And the brain of a 19-year-old idiot. If I didn't like music, I am not a millionaire, but I'm okay. I don't have to go anywhere anymore. I lucked out with land and all that. But the point I'm getting at is, if I didn't think I was going to have fun coming out and playing, I wouldn't come out. I love sitting at home. By the way, whatever I do hard. I get on stage, I play hard. If I sit at home, I do nothing hard. I can do it better than anybody. I can be a couch potato better than anybody living. But the hardest part about going out is not as much as I used to. I only go about 4 times a month, maybe. You got to practice every day. And it's hard at my age to really get yourself up there at an instrument to practice. Like George Foreman, 50 years old, if he has to have a fight, you think he wants to run 10 miles?
Yeah.
No way, he doesn't want to run half a block.
Yeah.
But to keep in shape, to be capable of doing what I'm capable of doing, I got to practice.
When you went out to Los Angeles, and what was the scene between black and white musicians like at that point?
You know, it's a weird thing. Let me first use a line that Dick Cavett said. I never looked at, before I say this, Dick Cavett once had Les Maddox on his show. You remember Les Maddox?
Yes.
He was the mayor of in Alabama. He was a bigot, now bigot.
Right.
He had him on a show, and Les is saying to Dick Cavett, he says, no, wait a minute, I'm not prejudiced at all, not at all. I don't see any difference between black and white. So Dick said, you better buy a pair of glasses because there's a big difference. There's black and white. I never looked at it as color. I wanted the best musicians in my band. Because when I lived on the East Coast, I went out, the quartet I had was with Terry Pollard for 4 years. I had the same musicians most of the time. I had 2 black, and Terry Pollard was a girl, young black girl, going on a road, you go down, they wanted to kill me, so was my wife. I never looked at it that way. I just got the best players I can get. I want the best players. I'm only as good as what's behind me. The racing, let's face it, it was bad all over. Even the music, it was bad, not for amongst the musicians, but the audience. Not even the audience that came in to see you. Once you got off the stage and walked out in the street, it was probably bad. Oh yeah, of course. I traveled with the whole black show. Biggest show I ever been in with my life, and I got to see how bad it was. It was called the Birdland All-Stars of 1957. Headliners, listen to the show, you won't believe this one show. Billy Eckstine in his heyday, and they had a trio with, the 3 guys, God, famous guy. Oh, Bobby Tucker on piano, and whoever he had bass playing drums. Sarah Vaughan, and she had Jimmy Jones playing piano, Roy Haynes playing, and Richard Davis, so that's that trio. Count Basie Band with Joe Williams. Now this is one show. Count Basie, Joe Williams. Phineas Newborn's trio. Bud Powell's trio. Leslie Young's trio. Zoot Sims, Chet Baker's group, and Jerry Southern went out with that show. But then, unfortunately, Chet Baker's band, they all got busted. After we were out about 3 days, Jerry Southern got fired because she was half drunk all the time. And Zoot had other commitments, so I was the only white person on the whole show. And I saw how bad it was for black people, not only down, but it was bad, not only with white people down south, but the black people weren't good to the guys. They'd rip them off at the hotels because you couldn't get to stay anywhere. they rip off the black guys just like a white guy would, you know. It was bad, but amongst us, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was great. I learned a whole new experience because everybody's got their own culture, you know.
Yeah.
I love ethnic humor. I love sick humor. Anything dumb and sick. See, I could never. You can't use those words today, calling each other.
Yeah.
What black people call you. Those days you could if you were in the thing. For some reason, with young people, it's more offensive. But amongst the guys, you know, it's something else.
Did you get to rub elbows much with Joe Williams?
One of I knew Joe Williams before the Basie Band because when I was with Woody Herman's band, we had a baseball team. You know, we had a team, and we used to play. Joe was with Red Saunders in Chicago. We used to play them in baseball.
Wow, that far back.
Yeah, I knew Joe from those days. And Joe and I were really close on the trips. I loved him. We really got along great.
Yeah. Well, this has really just been a
Great.
fascinating hour of talking. I'm
ready to faint, but it's okay.
I just, you fit a lot in, and I'm very appreciative
Well, I'm glad
of
it
your time.
worked out.
And,
I'm glad it worked out for you.
You know, what's in the future for you? Any exciting
Well,
projects
just
coming up?
concerts and festivals and college things. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
My best job actually is a college thing because first of all, Yamaha sponsors me now. The college can only afford to pay me $2. They pay the rest of it. I've made a deal with Yamaha to use their instrument. They supply me with an instrument everywhere I go. I put a price on my clinic, like I said, on my job. And I use the Dream Band music more than anything. I send out about 8 charts. Everybody wants to play it. And the band leader rehearses them all week or 2 weeks. And I get there Friday night, rehearse them Saturday afternoon, and do a clinic. I rehearse them, even though they know the charts, just the little edges I want. You know, I don't try to step on the band leader, make him look like he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
Because the music's already there. I'd have to spend like another week to get it like I wanted. But so it's so good, the music is so good, 60% of it is so good that 60% will sound good, no matter if they make mistakes. It's there. And I do a clinic, and I play the concert at night and go home the next day. I like those jobs. And I do that twice, 3 times a month. And then I work as much as I can with Buddy DeFranco.
Yeah.
That's my favorite of all.
Yeah.
We've been playing together for 25 years as co-leaders. No, not 25 years, since 1981, which is what, 22 years, no, 21? We've been playing together as co-leaders, and we have never come close to having an argument, ever. The 2 egos on stage, and Buddy's funny. He came to my clinic today, and he says this all the time. I tell the audience, we've never had a fight in 21 years, never. He says, the reason why, I don't know what he's saying. He talks so fast, I don't know what he's saying to me.
Good one. All right. Well,
Okay.
listen,
We
I hope
flew
you have
like
a safe
Hawaii
trip home.
slobber.
Yeah. Best of luck with your upcoming things, and really appreciate your time.